Welcome to the Real Talk with Pam, the show where authenticity meets conversations and where women's lived experiences become shared and learning ones. I'm your host, Pamela, and today I have the honor of sitting down with an incredible woman. Her name is Ndidi Nwuneli, a renowned Nigerian serial entrepreneur, founder of Leap Africa, Ace Foods, and Sahel Consulting. She's currently the CEO of the One campaign in Washington, D.C., where she's leading the charge to create transformative and sustainable change across Africa. Let's get started. Ndidi, welcome to Real Talk with Pam. How blessed I am to have you here with me today.
It's such a pleasure to be here, Pam. I'm so proud of you and all the work that you're doing to uplift voices.
Thank you. So you're a national treasure, Ndidi, and we appreciate you. So one of the things I think people want to know is how you got into social entrepreneurship. You grew up in Enugu, and so I wanted to know who were your role models growing up and what propelled you to get into social entrepreneurship?
Thank you so much for that question. So I grew up in Enugu, and I think my earliest role models were my parents. They're both university professors who had an Ivy League education and chose to come back to serve their nation at a very difficult time in our history. They came back to Nigeria in 1973. The East was still recovering from the Biafran War, and they chose to serve. And they introduced us to service from a very early age. We actually spent time visiting the elderly in the old people's homes, orphans. We ended up serving. We had a dance group my older sister started called Otumu Chineke, Children of God, that used to perform for others. And I think that commitment to service, I observed in their lives and how they put students first and serving Nigeria first, even times when they went for months without salaries during the military era. So for me, that was a blessing to be born into that family. I also have two older sisters who are extremely giving, kind, and serve. And so having those role models in my family, I learned authenticity, I learned selflessness, and I learned a love for Nigeria and a commitment to serve. As I've grown older, obviously I have new role models. Ndidi Okonkwo Nwuneli, I think, is a phenomenal role model. Seeing her at the global stage at the highest levels, defy all odds, seeing her role as a mother, grandmother, wife, and seeing her commitments to represent Nigeria so well inspires me every day. So I've been blessed with that slew of role models. Stella Okoli is another one, the MD of Emso Pharmaceuticals, just a fearless, courageous woman who has built a formidable business. Dr. Nadu Denloye. And then I have had role models in the US, two of my professors, Professor Linda Hill and Professor Deborah Starr at the Harvard Business School. So I've been blessed with angels on assignment, people who have not only been role models, but champions and sponsors for me, and who have really taken me under their broad wings and pulled me up as they have risen.
Amazing. So ever since I've known you, you've had a fantastic and real passion for Africa, Nigeria and Africa as a whole. And you've recently transitioned to a more global role as the CEO of One campaign, obviously focusing on how to shed Africa in a better light, creating justice and fair economic policies. How has that been? Your role so far? What has been the highlights, and what would you like to see on happen on the continent?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think when I was 16, I moved to the US, and the narrative of Africa I was confronted with was one of a hungry child.
Right.
Where people would remind me, that their parents used to tell them, oh, finish your dinner, there are hungry children in Africa. Or the face of poverty being a female farmer.
Right.
And these narratives were quite dangerous. And they've persisted for 30 years. And I think this narrative also puts us in this victim landscape where we are not agents of our own change.
Right.
And that's the danger of a single story. There is poverty in Nigeria, for example, but there is poverty in the United States.
That's true.
And it's important to tell a more nuanced, complex story about our continent. 54 amazing countries, extremely diverse, at different levels of development, with tremendous energy, creativity, innovation, young people leading change in the creative industries, in agriculture, in sports, in technology, and that nuanced approach is so critical. And so while I had worked here for 20 years building organizations, I felt it was time to really take that message on a global stage. And the One campaign has been working for 20 years to fight for equity and justice and to fight for the investments to ensure economic opportunities and healthy lives in Africa. And so when I was approached for that role, at first I was worried because I'm not an advocacy person. I'm an entrepreneur, a social entrepreneur. But over time, as I prayed about it, I felt at peace that this was a platform God was giving to me to use all the work I had done over the years on a global front. And so far, it's been exciting. I've learned a lot. I mean, One has offices in all the G7 countries. And what we have are team members who are really committed to fighting for the policies and the investments to ensure that there's change on the African continent. But we've also added a big component of narrative change to that work. Because to fight for investments for Africa, you have to convince people that we're investment ready. And that funding that comes into our continent will be utilized effectively. And so our Africa team is also here, and we have offices in Nigeria and South Africa and Senegal and team members across the continent who are also working on the continent to ensure accountability and transparency in the use of funds, that our organizations and institutions in Africa are delivering for their people, so that we have people on both sides, in the G7 and on the continent, who are working towards a common goal. And our vision is that Africa is an equal player on the economic landscape. And we have to achieve that in our lifetime. We owe it to our children and grandchildren.
Absolutely.
That we leave this continent better than we found it. And that the narrative changes from a hungry child to a successful female entrepreneur. That people see people like me and you as not exceptions. And they recognize that there are millions of people like us who are delivering every day for their people. And so we're working on all of that, on all those fronts. So it's exciting, it's challenging. It's not an easy job. I've been stretched in ways I can never imagine, but I've learned tremendously, and I'm excited about what the future holds.
One of the things I admire about you, Ndidi, and I've known you for 20 years, or just over 20 years, is your consistency in your character in terms of empowering women. You are a passionate advocate for women empowering other women. How do you think that we can do that specifically, particularly in Nigeria, where sometimes I find that people can fall into the comparison trap, and also speak to younger women who want to come up? How can we empower other women and come alongside each other to become better?
I think, there are three things that I really believe are critical in the empowerment journey. I think the first one is the recognition that no one can do it alone. You can rise to the top, but if you're the only one at the top, not only is it lonely, it's hard.
Sure.
And so you need to rise with others. I think Graça Michel says, as you're rising, pull up 10 other women so that you're rising together. So you have sisters supporting each other. That recognition changes your mindset because you're basically recognizing that you have to create space for others. And so I'm a big believer in celebrating women. As opportunities come to me, if I can't do it, I nominate other women. And that's important, right? Open a door. So you're the first, but you're not the last. Other women are coming up. Pull them up. Celebrate them. Shout their names in places where you can. And recognize that you need them. That sisterhood is critical for your success. The second is this recognition that we have to bring our A game every single time. So it's not just enough to be your champion of other women, but it's also important to enable women to bring their A game. Excellence and integrity have no hiding place. But women have to bring excellence into everything they do so that when they get there, they're not seen as a token. She's there because we need to fill a quota. She's there because she deserves a seat at the table. That seat is going to be utilized effectively. And she has made such a difference that, in fact, we've recognized that women need to be at the table. Because it's better for the business, it's better for the country, it's better for the region, etc. So that excellence and integrity is critical. And I think it's important we help each other. And this is where constructive feedback comes in, where you actually give other women constructive feedback. When you see opportunities for them to improve, you call them out. When you see opportunities for them to learn more and grow, you share those opportunities, etc. And that's where that accountability partnership comes in. I believe every woman needs an accountability partner, a prayer partner, who helps them also become more excellent because we're all learning together. And the third thing I think is a philosophy that we have to rise with other genders. I see a backlash against female empowerment in Nigeria and in many parts of the world because it's like, women are rising, what about the men? And I believe we have to rise together. And there's enough space for all of us. Our countries need to be so much better. So if we have everybody rising together in terms of getting wealthier. We have male billionaires, we have female billionaires. It's even less stress on the men.
That's right.
In Igbo culture, we have this term, osodiame. I follow my husband to do. I'm not there to be a Oriako to eat the money. I'm not there to be a Batako to bring the money.
Right.
Let's rise together.
Yeah.
And if we rise together, the home is happier. There's less pressure on the men. There's less pressure on the woman. And the children are happier. And so I think for me, that mindset is we can rise together. Men should be empowered. Women should be empowered. And we need to be comfortable that there's enough space for both of us to rise and respect each other in our society. And this is where it's important to check your quotas. You know, there are some organizations that have more women than men now. How do we ensure that we don't leave our men behind?
Sure.
And there are organizations that still are very skewed towards the male gender. How do we make sure that we create spaces for women, safe spaces for women? And I think that mindset and those open conversations have to be held in our society. And that we as mothers also have to do a better job in training both our daughters and our sons to recognize that it is okay for genders to rise. And that gender equity is not benefiting one over the other. Gender equity just means that we have equal pay for equal work. We have equal respect, and that everyone feels safe in a context. And that's what I think, that mindset shift has to happen. For both women who are in leadership and women who are rising.
How can that change, though? How can we help that mindset to change, particularly in Nigeria?
I think number one is having very open discussions. I always used to laugh in Nigeria that when I'm invited to be a keynote speaker at International Women's Day, it's only women in the room.
Right.
And I said, how is it possible that it's International Women's Day and it's only women in the room? That's actually a disservice to the company. Because in International Women's Day, everybody should be in the room discussing gender equity. You know what I mean? That's very practical. To say, yes, we need male champions, we need male sponsors, we need he for she's, just like we need she for he's, right? And that discussion, International Men's Day, it should be all genders.
Sure.
And if there are issues that you have to have in closed doors, then there's a problem because this bias cannot be addressed, right? The second is there's really an important role for quotas. And it was actually Lamido Sanusi Lamido, when he was CBN governor, who insisted that banks should have 30%, at least 30% females on their boards.
Right.
Because of that commitment that he made and that policy, today we have Nigerian banks led by women as CEOs, which never happened 20 years ago. We have women who are chairs of boards who are delivering excellent work. And we're starting to see changes in the banking sector where there are now loans for women, where it's easier for women to have financial access, etc. So I think that quotas have a very critical role to play. And we've seen evidence of that with that simple policy. And the third, I would say, is that we have to check in every context what our equity norms are and how those show up. I remember the first board meeting I went to for a publicly traded company in Nigeria. The letter said, "Dear sirs," I was the first woman to join the board. The toilet said male toilets. And I realized I was the first woman. So they didn't know that they had to say, I had to write them to say, "Dear sirs and madam."
Right.
And that, can we just remove the male toilet on the door so that anybody can use the toilet? Because otherwise I have no toilet. And that was my first board seat in a publicly traded company in Nigeria. Another board I went to, somebody called me and I want to discuss a board with you. And he told me, let me be frank, we have no women and we're under pressure to have a woman on our board. And that's why we want to talk to you. And when I was leaving, he said, "Have a good day, Ngozi." And I said, number one, you want to fill a quota. Have a good day, Ngozi. My name is Ndidi. Do you think I joined that board? Absolutely not. You have to at least know my name.
Absolutely.
The point is, there's a challenge we have in our society, and that is the third piece, where you really have to change the norms of the organization with the names, with how the pay scale. I always tell companies, check your pay scale. Is it equitable? They always say it's equitable until they check. And they find out that for roles that both men and women have, oftentimes women are paid less. Oftentimes because the women are not arguing for pay raises during those conversations because they're just so happy to have that job. You know what I mean? And things like that. So you need to really think through your policies and how you are ensuring that that culture is an equitable culture, a culture where people feel safe. Sexual harassment is another thing. in many of the organizations, they are not clearly stipulated rules for what constitutes sexual harassment. And even the organizations I have started, I recognize that the society was trickling into the company. Is it okay for a woman to feel unsafe? Do you understand? And to be propositioned in the workplace.
Right.
And we had to have very clear rules so that now women are empowered to say that is in the rule. You can't proposition me in the workplace, especially if you're in a senior role. And I think if we don't take a stand on some of these and have explicit policies and track those policies that they're implemented, we will not move forward in creating safe spaces for women and for men.
For men, sure. Wow, thank you, Ndidi. These are real actionable nuggets that you've just shared. We'll take a quick break right now. When we'll come back, we'll continue this amazing conversation with Ndidi. Welcome back to Real Talk with Pam. Today we've had the amazing Ndidi Nwuneli talking to us about her life and her passions. So Ndidi, tell me, ever since I've known you, you've been a high pressure person. You deal with pressure really well. Your life, I feel like right now, is on steroids. How do you deal with that pressure? How do you balance all the things that you have to do?
Yeah, I think it's been tough. I thought I was actually really good at multitasking and I could handle pressure. I'm not sure I'm as confident as you are, my ability to handle pressure.
Way.
But I'll say there are three things. Number one is really a reliance on God. If not for God, where would we be? The source of my strength, the source of my vision, passion is really God. I feel that I've been called by God for such a time like this and that I want to die empty. And that propels me. It gives me kind of a fire. We don't know how long we're going to be on earth. So use every single day as if it was your last. So I would say that's the first thing. And every time I want to give up, every time I feel weak, every time I feel, constrained, God sends angels on assignments. I have prayer partners. I have people holding me up. I have, people sending a word at the exact moment I need it from God. So I'm just truly blessed to have a real support network spiritually that really holds me up, because that's been, what has been my anchor for the last 8 months as I've taken this job. I would say the second thing is really taking life 1 hour at a time. We have a mutual friend, Motu, who tells me, Ndidi, just take it 1 hour. Meaning I don't plan for tomorrow. I mean, I know what I'm going to be doing for the next 3 months in terms of my travel schedule, but in terms of my daily life, I want to say I got through this hour, I can do the next hour, I can do the next hour. Otherwise, you're overwhelmed. In the next 3 months, I'm probably going to be in 10 countries, right? And some countries for 24 hours. Emotionally, physically, it's draining. If you kind of think through that, you're overwhelmed. But you have to just take it one day at a time. And I realized at the end of the day, I say, I put in my best self today and I can face tomorrow because of God. So just give yourself that allowance to just pace yourself and not try to do it. And then the final one is realize you'll drop some balls. Realize that you're not perfect and don't beat yourself up. I'm learning that, but I used to beat myself up. Maybe I'll get off the stage and I'll say, that speech was 3 over 10. I missed so many things. I should have said this. Why didn't I say this? And all night I'll be thinking about what I didn't do, because that's someone who's an A-type personality. You want to shine every single time, but you have to realize there are going to be times when you shine, and there's going to be times when you forget, you miss this, you miss that, and it's okay. You're not perfect. And the allowance to say, I messed up, I'm sorry, I could have done better, and just say, I'll do better next time. I think it's okay. And I think women need to give them, especially women, need to give themselves that allowance that sometimes balls will be dropped. I realized, for example, my son was coming home for Christmas. I had actually bought him like 3 tickets for the same trip. I had forgotten that I had bought the tickets. Literally.
Right.
And I was like, well, I was overdoing. Not realize, did I buy that ticket? No, I didn't buy it. Well, let me buy it. And then I realized, okay, thank God I can cancel one and get full credits. So, I was able to sort it out. But the realization that sometimes you are so frazzled that you don't realize that you've done something when you've done it or you've not done it. And it's okay. Just say, I'm imperfect. And the ability to also apologize to those when maybe you've been short-tempered, maybe you've missed something, to say, I'm sorry. It doesn't take anything. It doesn't make you feel less. In fact, it's more empowering that you can be a human being. I'm a human being. Am I a machine? Can make mistakes. Please don't. I'm sorry. I think that realization, that allowance, frees you
Yeah.
to be vulnerable and to realize you can't do it all. So really, my dear, that's how I've been coping. It's the perfect. People say, oh, come and talk to us about work-life balance. I am not a role model for work-life balance. I do not have it. You understand? I have not gone to the gym in 2025. I probably will not go the whole year. It's okay. You understand? The point is, you can't do it all. But I love what I'm doing. I feel called to do it, so I'm happy to work. I just have to make sure that I make the time for the things I also love and for the people I love. And that's how I'm balancing it. But in terms of, gym, spa, beauty routine, please don't come to me. I'm not a role model in any of those.
Sure. One of the things I love about you, Ndidi, with your pressured life, you still find time to be a great mom. You're a great mom to your kids. Can you speak to women who are in your sphere of life in terms of business that can feel that guilt, how they can be great moms without, feeling so guilty, and what it looks like for you?
Well, I would say that the first thing I learned being a mom was that it takes a village. I moved to Lagos. I didn't grow up in Lagos. I'm an Enugu girl. And when I moved to Lagos, I really didn't have relatives in Lagos. So I had to create a village. And God has been so good. You don't have to raise your children by yourself. God has sent me angels on assignments. I mean, the godparents for my children were divinely appointed. They've taken their responsibility seriously. The friends that God has put around me. And the ability to ask them for help. I'm traveling. Can you take my daughter here? Can you take my daughter there? And I think, or my son here. Even now, there are people who are my friends, close friends, who my son talks to more than me.
Right.
And that's fine. Because many children, when they're going to young adult or teenage lives, they think their parents don't know anything, but they think other people know. So let the other people who know and who they trust be the ones to talk to them. So I think you create your village and don't be afraid to ask for help in raising your children, provided the people that are in your village share your values of integrity and excellence and in my case, strong Christian values, Christian norms. The second is, it's really important to be intentional about parenting. And actually, I learned this from another mom. Just like I have evaluations with my team, and they evaluate me and I evaluate them, I also have evaluation sessions with my children. Am I a good mother? What are the things I'm doing well? What are the things I could do better? What are the things that matter to you? And what are the things that don't matter to you? And that's helpful. I wanted my children to give me feedback. And sometimes it's painful, but sometimes it's very helpful to know the things you can do better and to create a safe space for your children to feel like they can also give you feedback. And then the third thing I would say, it's really important to understand that each child is different. And the way you parent one child is not the same way you parent another. And the way you were parented doesn't mean that's how you're going to parent. We're living in a new era. The way we were parented, it doesn't work today. And so I'm learning as I'm going and being vulnerable with your children to say, you know what, I'm struggling. There's no manual in parenting. I'm learning every day. Please forgive me. If I've made mistakes, please forgive me. And I think for me, showing your children the difficulties you're facing, even in your job, showing them the challenges you're facing in your work, allows them to see that you're human. Sometimes I even tell them, this is what I'm facing, and they give me advice. Sometimes they listen to my calls and they're like, Mommy, I think you should do this. I think sometimes that advice is very relevant. So I think seeing them as people who are evolving and who can be trusted to share in your journey and your burden, where it's not just receiving all the time from their parents, but that they can give and pour into their parents' lives, I think is also, so I'm learning. It's a journey. I'm glad you think I'm a good mom. Actually, I remember Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. One day I met her. My first early encounters with her, I told her, you have 4 amazing children. I'm so inspired by how you've done it. And she said, please ask my children. Right. You think I'm an amazing mom. It's my children that will be able to be in a position to tell. And she's done fantastic with her children now, grandchildren. And I think that vulnerability that, the world might celebrate you, but it's the children who are interacting with you who know. I think I've been sobered by the fact that Mandela was a great man, but his family fought and were not united in his death. You understand? Gandhi was a phenomenal leader. We've never heard of Gandhi's children today. Right. So you think about it and you're like, you don't want to be someone who is celebrated globally, but your house is in disarray. Of course. And so for me, that's a priority. I want to, my part of being a success is having children who fulfill their highest potential, who are balanced, who understand service, and who have integrity. And for me, that would be one legacy I leave to the world.
Awesome. Yeah. The reason I say you're a great mom, Ndidi, we often talk about this because I think that for children, for us in this world where there's so much competition, you want your kids to go to the best schools. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think we often talk about how it's important for our kids to have good character, have integrity, have great values. And I think that's what makes you, I think, a great mom, because you hone those things into your kids' minds. So finally, or almost finally, what would people be surprised to know about you, Ndidi?
Most of my life is out there in the public domain, so there are very few surprises. I would say, I don't know if there's anything else in the public domain, but one thing I love is music, right? I love singing. I used to be in a gospel choir. I used to be in a choir all through childhood, my school choir in primary school, secondary school, and I would love to be in a choir now.
Oh, wow.
In a church, but I just don't have the time. So my kids always joke that, one of the things I would love to do in my retirement is to be in a choir or to direct a choir. And one of my dreams is to have like a national choir competition in Nigeria, which would then become like a global contribution to the world, where we get to sing in different Nigerian languages.
Wow.
So music is one of my loves and passions, especially gospel music. So that's one of the things.
We'll hold her to that when she retires.
That's one of the things I love. I would love to be a judge on one of these competitions around Christian music, which I'd love to create. So let's see. Let's watch.
I didn't even know that. Yes, yes. There you go. All right. Finally, quick fire questions I'm going to ask you. Yes. So, food. Amala or eba?
Amala.
How about staying at home or partying?
Staying at home.
Really?
I would have said partying, but now I want to. My job means that I go out all the time. So now staying at home is a luxury. It just shows you how your life flips. Yes.
Shopping or traveling?
Neither. I travel too much. I like online shopping these days just because of time.
Yes. Wine or champagne?
Champagne.
Oh, really?
I used to say neither, but now I would do a little bit of champagne. I don't like wine.
Chocolate or cake?
Chocolates. I'm a chocoholic.
Yes, I do. Wow. Ndidi, thank you so much for sharing your nuggets and your wisdom and being so open and inspirational.
Thank you so much.
I'd like to thank our viewers for watching today and thank Ndidi for taking time out to be with us here today. Till next time, keep being authentic. I'm Pamela Igbo. Bye for now.